everyone, and welcome to Children's Day on the Farm. Today my sisters and I are going to show you what life was like for children who grew up in the Carolina Piedmont in the 19th century.
Not everyone was fortunate enough to grow up wealthy, so most children spent their days working with their parents on their family's farm. It was also true for children who grew up enslaved, like those on the Bratton plantation. Instead of living on their own family's farm, enslaved children were forced to work on plantations.
We're going to show you what children did throughout the day to help their families, but we're also going to show you that children in the 19th century loved having time to play too. Let's go.
After waking up at dawn with the rest of the family, the first thing the children would do would be to make up their beds and get dressed. After that, they would head outside and bring water for cooking and washing and firewood to keep the fire going. This was a big help to Mother, who would already be fixing up breakfast for everyone.
The next big responsibility would be to help Father look after the livestock. Every family depended on their animals for food or work. So it was important to make sure that all the animals were healthy and had enough food and water.
This meant bringing grain or hay to some of the animals or turning the animals out into the pasture so that they could graze on grass. Sometimes you might even discover a new baby had been born the night before.
Every morning, there were two especially important chores: milking the cow and collecting eggs from chickens. These delicious things often became part of breakfast. Did you know that the average cow in the 19th century could produce over 2 gallons of milk every day? That's a lot of milk. And in the 19th century, refrigerators hadn't been invented yet, so people had to figure out what to do with it because their cow would give them even more the next day. One great way to use up milk was to make butter, which children in the 19th century learned how to do from a young age, so I'm going to show you how they did it. First, here are all of our tools used to make butter: a butter churn, a butter paddle, the dasher, the molds, and a small bowl. I made sure to wash everything very well beforehand to keep the butter as clean as possible. To get started, I'm going to begin with the cream that came from milk. When you let fresh milk sit for a little while, the cream will float to the top and you can skim it off. That's what I have here. To get started, I'm going to begin with the cream that came from milk. When you let fresh milk sit for a little while, the cream will float to the top and you can skim it off. That's what I have here. So I'll take cream and pour it into the butter churn, and then I'll start churning. Depending on the heat, this can take anywhere from half an hour to much longer than that. At this point, you'll notice that the cream is starting to get thicker on the dasher. That is the butter starting to form from the fat in the cream, but it's not ready yet. Now you can see that there are little flecks of butter starting to form. It won't be long now. Finally, the butter is ready. You can see the cream has separated into thick lumps. The butter and clearest liquid, which we call buttermilk. Buttermilk is delicious to cook with, and it's even good to drink all by itself. The next thing we will do is strain the butter out of the buttermilk.
Kind of lumpy.
Now we are going to do the most important part of making butter: washing it. Butter is very shelf stable and doesn't require refrigeration, but buttermilk will spoil. So I have to wash the butter and using the butter paddle squeeze out as much buttermilk as I can. As you can see, it helps to have two people working on this. Now that the butter has been washed, it's ready to eat. Sometimes people will add salt or herbs to make it taste even better, but it's alright to eat by itself. In the 19th century, people would even shape their butter into pats by pressing it into a butter mold. Molds came in many shapes and sizes, like the one you see here. But whether the butter looks pretty or just came straight from washing, it's going to be delicious. And here's our butter.
The real chores begin after breakfast. These chores might be different every day because children's work depended on what had to be done on the farm. Today we're working on planting beans. In the 19th century, people had to grow or raise most of the food they ate, so children would help their parents plant. Enslaved children might help their parents plant vegetables in the garden or help plant bigger seeds like cotton or corn. Today I'm going to show you how to plant a seed. You can try this at home in your own garden or yard. Just make sure you ask permission first. The first thing we're going to do is to figure out where you want your plant to grow. Do you want it to grow in the ground or do you want it to grow in a pot? I'm going to put our seeds in the ground, as you can see here. And I've made sure to pick a place where the plants will get plenty of sunlight. You can also see that there are some hills on the ground where I'll plant the seeds. These little hills are made out of good soil that will feed the seeds as they grow. Next, I'm going to push the seeds into the ground until I get to the second knuckle on my finger. Other kinds of seeds like to be planted at other kind of depths. So before you do this, you might want to do some research. After the seed is in the soil, I'll take a little of the dirt around it and cover it up, pressing down lightly. Be careful not to press too hard. And I'm going to continue down the row until I get to the next hill, where I can plant the same kind of seeds or pick a different kind. Finally, I'm going to water the seeds. Not too much, just to keep the soil damp.
In the 19th century, many families had a tradition of turning wool or cotton into fabric. Some families had made enough so that they could sew their own clothing. Most families, though, only made enough fabric for towels, mattresses, washcloths, or other things around the house, if they even had looms to weave fabric at all. In order to be able to make fabric, the family first had to turn cotton and wool into thread or yarn. This happened through a process called spinning. Spinning takes a lot of time and practice, so it was usually something the mother and older sisters knew how to do. But even the younger children could be part of the process by helping with carding. I'm going to show you how carding works and why it was a big help to the mother if someone would card for her. First of all, what is carding? When farmers first cut or shear wool off of sheep, the wool is a dirty, tangled mess. It would be impossible to spin wool like this, and it would make a disgusting thread. So, after the wool has been washed very well, the children would take two brushes called cards and then would brush out the tangles. You can see that I'm brushing the wool to go in one direction. When the tiny wool fibers all go the same direction, it is much easier to spin. Now that the wool is smooth and untangled, I'm going to start to get it off the brushes by brushing in the opposite direction. Next, I'm going to hand this carded piece of wool called a roll lag to the spinner, who will feed it to the spinning wheel, which turns the wool into thread or yarn. Why is it such a big help for me to card while mother spins? If I'm doing all the carding, she doesn't have to stop spinning. When we work together like this, we can turn a lot more wool into thread than if mother works all by herself. The finished wool yarn could go to the weaver next to be turned into fabric, but I hope it will be knit into a pair of warm mittens just in time for winter. Probably the biggest way that children helped their family in the 19th century was cooking. This is one chore that never came to an end, and Mother could use all the help she could get. This was especially true for enslaved families, where the cook had to feed the plantation owner's entire family as well as her own.
In the 19th century, in South Carolina, there were two things that everyone ate. Whether they were wealthy like the Brattons or living enslaved on a plantation or just average, everyone ate corn and pork. Corn was easy to grow and pigs were easy to raise.
So today we're going to show you how to make corn cakes. Corn cakes had a lot of different names, like Johnny cakes, hoe cakes, or corn bun. There were a lot of different ways to make them, but all corn cakes had some basic ingredients: cornmeal, water, and salt. You can even add flour, eggs, sugar, and lard to get cornbread. Our recipe will be simple: 3 spoonfuls of cornmeal, 1 egg, enough water to make the batter just a little thicker than pancake batter, and enough salt for it to taste good. So first we're going to add the cornmeal. Next, you're going to crack in the egg. And we're going to add a little water at first, so we don't get it too wet. Marco, you want to add a little? Now we're going to add a little more water because, as you can see, it's very... Try to get all of it in.
In the 19th century, everyone cooked their food over a fire. You can do this outside or inside over the heat in the kitchen. Corn cakes could be baked in a Dutch oven or cooked in the hot ashes. But we're going to fry ours. Just like today, children who cooked in the kitchen had an adult there to cook with them.
First, I'm going to use a shovel to put down a layer of cold ashes to protect the bricks of the hearth. Next, I'm going to pull out some of the hot coal. These coals are very hot, so I have to be careful not to get too close. Now I'm going to put my skillet over the coals. The coals are hot enough that they'll get the skillet to a temperature right to fry our corn cakes. Once the skillet is hot enough, I'm going to put some butter, and the melted butter will keep the corn cakes from sticking onto the skillet and burning. In the 19th century, people would use butter or bacon fat to cook with, although there are lots of other things we use today. Finally, when the butter is sizzling, we know that our skillet is hot enough to fry our corn cakes. I am very careful put them in the skillet, and a few minutes we will flip them over and cook the other side.
Once they cool, we can top them with more butter or molasses. They're just what we needed to add to our lunch.
After lunch or dinner, as they called in the 19th century, children often have time to take a break from their chores and spend time playing. They might go swimming or fishing if it was warm enough, or they'd find a toy to play with. Even enslaved children had time to play.
Most families didn't have much money for toys, so their children's toys were things they found around the house or things they could make at home. Dolls and their clothes were made out of extra fabric or even corn husk. Clay was baked into marbles. Extra pieces of wood became Jacob's ladders and 9-pins, and a length of rope became a jump rope. Here's one of the toys that only needed a piece of string and a button, a buzz toy.
Lots of times, though, when children had brothers or sisters or friends to play with, they would spend their time playing games all together. A few popular games were Hide the Slipper, Annie Over, and Hide and Seek.
That was just us being slow.
Another popular game in the 19th century was Blind Man, which we're going to show you how to play. First, start with the person who will play the blind man, and blindfold her. Her goal is to run around and catch one of the other children.
Well, I guess we better go. But as you can see, Children's Day in the 19th century was busy. That was true whether your family was enslaved or free.
And after all the working and playing, we still have a few things to do after supper. They would help Mother wash the dishes, help Father with the animals, and then practice reading and writing before they go to bed if they were in school.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We had fun showing you how children helped out on the farm in the 19th century. I hope you'll get to try out some of the activities we showed you at your house.